we'd like to introduce you. So Sevan Bomar is a metaphysical philosopher, speaker, and leader. He's author of the acclaimed book, The Code to the Matrix. And he has a number of popular websites, including The Resistance and Astral Quest. Sevan Bomar has got the most amazing knowledge on topics of esoteric knowledge, on religion, on chakras, on frequency vortex and imprinting, on total realization. And he's very experiential in this knowledge and really blows us away.
He really does. He's incredibly knowledgeable, and we're so glad to have him here to talk about aspects of the paradigm shift. And we just want to thank you for being with us today, Sevan.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. I'm testing out my sound, making sure I'm coming through clear and everything.
Uh-huh. We hear you very clearly.
All right. Well, I'm also ready to jump right into this. So,
All righty. So, Sevan, what we wanted to ask you is, this is a conference about the paradigm shift. So we'd like to start off by asking you, what do you see as the paradigm shift? How do people live through the paradigm shift, and how do people find their role in the paradigm shift?
Well, all of what you just stated is actually key. I mean, it's almost like when listening to, obviously Dr. Lipton and then yourselves, go on for the last 2 hours. I was just like, so where am I going to get in on this conversation? Because basically they're taking up all the words.
Right. And I think we're going to sign out and just let you go on and do your presentation from here.
I mean, I love the collective presentations. We can definitely keep it like that. But I was just saying, I mean, there were so many maxims presented within both conversations. It really is something for any listener to sit back and reflect on. And that's really, where I'm also at now with my progress as far as everything that I've done thus far and what I'm looking to continue to do, not only for humanity, but also myself. And for those that are not aware of who I am, because I'm obviously not the most famous person in the world, but I will say that, just because sometimes a person may say, well, how are you able to speak on these topics, or what gives you the authority, if you may? And what I would like to mention is that I did start a social network about 7 years ago that was related to exploring the depths of consciousness and to look for the vivid aspects of it, and for us to go into this activation or ascension that I had been participating in personally and had my own experience. And then I started sharing information, and then I started finding others that were having similar experiences, and it started from there. And this was 7 years ago. Now the network is at about 16,000 members. We've done TV shows, radio shows, we've had some of our own, and we've even created a university, and all these different aspects of things that have been created, either co-created collectively, which is always the case, we're co-creating all the time, and then also things that others were lending, such as this platform that I'm participating on now. And what was one of the most amazing things to me is just when you have, let's say in this tense, there's 14,000 members and you have 28,000 eyes looking at every single aspect that you may be missing, and then coming back and giving you that.
I'm sorry, Sevan, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Could you turn up your mic, please?
Sure, I could turn up my gain. Give me one quick second. Let me just.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Let me get over to where my gain is. 1 second. Not too much. Just turn a little.
No worries.
Okay, so how about that? Is that any louder, or I don't want to blow it out of the frame? I do have a equalizer here. So do you want me to turn it up a little bit more?
Yes, a little more.
Okay.
Good. We want to hear you. Everybody wants to hear you nice, loud and clear.
Okay. All right, not too much more. That's good. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now you go right on. We're going to stay here, but we're going to let you do your presentation. I know you've got a lot of great things to say, so
that's fine. I'm
please
glad you
continue.
About the sound, so that way, it's not the whole thing and everyone's like, well, I didn't hear him. So what I'm getting at here is that there's been an extensive amount of not only research, but also intuitive connection with what's going on the planet and beyond. And we've taken a different approach. We've really allowed the person to be the central character in this entire theme. There's no gurus, or there's no one saying, hey, follow me. And then also we're really moving out a lot of the deities, or things that basically require a person to have energy to contribute. Like if you believe in something, that's energy that you're contributing towards it. And what we really challenge people to do is to start doing some introspections, to start going back within in order to get themselves together. And thus we coined the term Innerstanding. And so what's been happening with this Innerstanding for the last 7 years is we've unearthed some remarkable things. This all began with me personally taking apart the English language and finding that there was an underlying code within the language that was actually saying a story, because language can't be replaced right away. So just how we have many cultures that have basically lost their entire, all their roots and all their lineage and everything that is really connected into that, most of that has been despoiled and they've been given a new tradition and a new religion. But language is not something that you can replace like that. Language is actually the code that programs us all into perceiving this reality the way that we do. And so one of the things that came up on my radar when I first went through my personal expansion or ascension, or what you want to call it, is I started to see that there was an issue with the words, that in fact that the words that we were using weren't actually saying what we thought they said or what we thought they mean. And that was big, because what it did was it allowed me to uncover the other areas where a lot of times my positive or at least neutral belief in things and my own insecurities about the reality as far as how it was structured and what was going on in it, especially in pertaining to spirituality, was cleared up in a major way, because I was able to see that actually there's a program that's running that is a bit counterproductive for the direction that we want to go. And all of that was actually summed up in one word: backwards, in English, meaning that the words are actually backwards. And that this can indeed control the aspect of how we think. Like one direction, let's say, is living and the other direction is death. This is a physical reality. So it often works on these dualistic components. And once realizing that and being able to turn things around in order to get into, let's say, when people refer to ascension, what they're actually talking about is getting back to their true selves, getting back, or as I always say, getting forward to this oversoul or this higher aspect of yourself that's in a perfected shape. And, you know, this journey has been amazing. And so just to drill into what is being said about, you know, this paradigm and the question presented to me, you know, now that you know a little bit more about my background, my spiritual experiences, and also what I've done for the conscious community and continue to do, I will first say that when we look at any kind of term, we have to understand that there's a linear version and there's a non-linear version. So the linear version to me is always what we've come up with thus far in our experience and the reality, maybe what we've gained from others, what we read, etc. But generally, because we're reading knowledge, it's going to come to us in a physical base level and often linear. Like, this is what they said 20 years ago. This is what's supposed to happen in 5 years. This is what we're coming up to. And all those, that's a linear way of thought. And sometimes linear thought can be depressing, because if you're talking to a person that's, let's say, 60 and you're explaining to them that things are going to get better, well, you know, it may not be in the lifetime that they see things get, they may not be able to see things get better this life if they are playing around with linear time. While if you look at the deeper level of the paradigm shift, which is nonlinear, you realize that you can actually cause the paradigm shift anytime you want. So there's basically what's going on in the reality, and then there's what's going on inside. And what's most important about the realization of this is to also remember that actually what Earth truly is, which has been proved in every single art, every single science, you name it, is a spectrum. So it doesn't just actually contain all the things that we quote unquote like, and it doesn't just contain all the things that we don't like, but instead an entire spectrum of these in order to get the in-betweens, in order to get what we call the saga or the story. And of course, we become very prone to, like, let's say mice pushing the pleasure button or rat pushing the pleasure button. We get prone to actually benefiting or making ourselves benefit from the positive sides of the reality. And then when it comes to the negative, we don't seem to see the real purpose in that. In addition, this is very similar to, let's say, liking to eat candy and cakes, but when it comes to bitter medicine, like let's say iboga or wormwood, these kind of things that can actually remove a lot of the parasites and things from your consciousness and from your body, then that of course, you know, tastes nasty, and people have a tendency to avoid that. And so this is what I began to discover, and I started to look deeper into, were we doing that also in our own presence, in our own reality? And in fact, the case became true about that we can actually say a lot of very beautiful things to ourselves, and we can continuously encourage ourselves. And of course, I don't see anything wrong with doing that. It's better than saying negative things to yourself and punishing yourself. But the reality is that through these two actions, we can make ourselves feel a certain way. But what connection does that have to the external reality? And this is where we have to start drawing a line, or somewhat of a demarcation, between what we expect to go on in the physical realities in their own time versus what can actually happen for us right now. And that every single part of the spectrum, whether you want to call it happiness, whether you want to call it sadness, is present on the dimension right now and always will be. Meaning that if you want to go somewhere that's going to provide to you what you feel like is complete happiness and positivity, there is a place on this planet that is actually hosting that. While if you want to go to just ground zero where everything's bombed out and it's basically the end, then there's a place in the reality that hosts that also. So what we find then is that because the universe is not linear, we find that actually it is as it states, it's a universe or university, that the entire process here is actually for you to learn your uniqueness, because once you learn your uniqueness, then you're able to flourish. You're able to actually get in the same zone of how you create your currency with what is most unique and special to you. And so this is where it gets a little bit confusing, because we know that we're all one, but in that same sentence, we can also say that we're all unique. And those are two opposites. So we should get used to that, because this is a paradoxical reality. And if we're thinking in binary, we always try to get one or the other to be the truth, but in fact, they're both truth. And where we should be at is actually in the arbitration standpoint, or in the center of our consciousness. This is how we'll actually be able to control the causes and effects of what goes on in the reality. And I'll explain that in a deeper way. If we're constantly in joy when we receive something that we like, this seems to also set us up for, you know, extreme discouragement when we see something that we don't like. And when the person removes themselves from the likes and dislikes, they find that they actually find this harmonic to where they're stable, because what happens in this reality is there's a sun and a moon. So just the sun and the moon alone says that there's going to be a cycle, or there's going to be waves. We can even take the moon just as itself alone. It causes different cycles, different waves. And because of that, you're going to find many biological organisms that are often either in their good mood or in their bad mood. And all of us have experienced that. But in order to get to a point of being constant, which is really the opening of the depth, is you need to be constant, you need to be sovereign, you need to have a foundation, and all that others and other things, other projections can stand on firmly. And to do that, it really requires that one get off the roller coaster and actually start sending out a constant, steady vibration or harmonic that becomes a host to their projections. So of course, tuning into too many different things that keep you on that roller coaster don't allow you to actually build things to where they can actually exist, even in a physical reality, or where they come to birth. So there was a lot of knowledge about this in every single interim of ancient societies. We have to also realize that, and I'll just give it to you like this, in the distance between where our planet is and the next projection, either it's going to be extremely advanced or extremely primal, nowhere in between. So where our planet is now, where we're visiting, this place that we are now incarnated into, woke up into this aspect of the dream, it is actually just coming off of a primal state. That's why there's this whole grab for technology. Versus if you go into a much more advanced planet, you'll find that actually they nullified all ideas of wires and, you know, anything that has to do with the actual inorganic infrastructure. And they started going to things like using crystals and using things that was going to naturally interact with us from a vibratory level. Okay. And that's where these stories of Atlantis and Lemuria and many other civilizations actually come from. So what happens in the physical realities is that's actually going on right now. That even ancient Kemet or Egypt or whatever you want to call it is actually happening right now. Rome is still going on. And there's a place that you are even there. And this is what we started to discover, that this continuum was actually us sending out aspects of ourselves into other realities. Even every time you think, you send another aspect of yourself into a different reality. And then the stronger you believe in those thoughts, it begins to animate those realities. And this is what many people refer to as a holographic reality. So there's multiple realities running. And what death actually consists of is that we leave this reality the reality that we currently die in, and then we slide into another reality that is more prime. And every now and then you have a dream about these prime realities, because these dreams are different than the other dreams, because it actually feels like you're really there. And even sometimes when you wake up, it's just difficult to adjust to that you were in another reality and then now you're back in this one again. How does that even work? And for us to begin to comprehend how this works, but from a deeper level, what I call the all-knowing, is we move out of this binary thought, good and bad, I feel great, I don't feel good. We move out of that and allowing our consciousness to be a host to that. And then we move over into this trinary aspect of ourselves, which begins to even have definitions, if you may, for paradoxical realities. So let's just talk about very briefly about what the paradigm shift would consist of for an individual that is going through it. It would consist of the process to where they're discovering their uniqueness. And the reason for this is because you're in a physical reality, you also notice that we actually have to find our way in the world right now. There's no just moving that out of the way. Like if we just said, hey, namaste, let's just wait on the dollar system to die and then everything's going to get better. We probably would be waiting around for a long time. Who knows? But the truth is, if you want to get into your own driver's seat right now, it really requires you to see that all of these energies, whether they're money or whatever, are to measure the energetic potential in the reality. They're actually alchemy. And when you discover your uniqueness, you actually solve the riddle of even working and doing something in the reality that you don't like, that's when it becomes a work or a job versus fun. Right? So when you discover your uniqueness, let's say if you like to paint and you know that that's your unique way, the more you develop that ability, then you're capable of actually using it as a way to sustain yourself. And then you'll find, if that's your true uniqueness, that you'll never actually get tired of painting. You'll never feel like, oh my goodness, I'm being overworked with this painting that I'm doing. It actually won't come across like that. There will only be more joy the more energy is pushed into this aspect of you painting, okay, and creating art. So what your uniqueness is actually your own art. So a lot of times we attempt to take inspiration from others, but the true method of allowing a person to discover their uniqueness was actually, in the ancient society, was actually an elder would teach you. They would take you through the rites of passage and teach you how to discover this uniqueness within yourself. So it's totally opposite actually to much of how things are taught these days. Things are taught really to where it's like someone's trying to impress something on you, like let's learn about this key figure, or let's learn about this god, or let's learn about, you know, this set of knowledge, more so than let's learn about yourself and let me show you how to know more about yourself. And the reason for this is that actually let's say the book or curriculum level of teaching a person about themselves is actually the most outdated. A person would learn the most about themselves dealing with the real matrix in this case being nature. The fake matrix in this case being something like New York. So what the matrix, as it begins with ma, actually which comes from the words matrices, it would be able to at least teach you the guidelines and the ropes through symbolism and through observing the realities. For instance, we see that nature has a growth cycle and a decay cycle. So it doesn't mean just things are about growth and abundance. It also means things are about separation and things are about decay. And it would show you that so that you can identify those aspects in yourself, because once you have both of them identified, then you can actually determine what's in between. And that's the purpose of the dualistic reality, because it actually bases everything on contrast, right? Even the two eyes and two sides of the body, everything here is based on contrast. And so the paradigm shift is when you get it. It's like, okay, you know what? I get the whole thing now. It's going to be a yin and a yang, just like the old symbols say. There's not going to be some massive thing going in one direction or another direction here. What's most important is that I figure out how to make that happen within myself, because then when I do that, everything that I create and every person that I come around will experience that. And so this is a way of basically perfecting yourself, what we call innerstanding, in order so you can actually be in the proper position to actually assist others in this process of growth and figuring out themselves. And so that's what I have to say about the paradigm shift and what it actually means to me. Obviously, each person is going to have their different meaning, but I can see that this world, and this is from a realm of knowing, this realm is also in a continuous continuum itself. So it will go just like nature shows that she goes. She goes into this young cycle, the mistress, and then she goes into the maiden, and then she goes into the crone. And then when that is all happening, which is, you know, a big part of time, you have this allocation. And this is what some people see as the zodiac. You have this allotment to where you're given talents. And that's why I said you should work to find your uniqueness. You're given these talents, and that's the way that's how you fit in on this ship. It's like, you know, someone at this control panel or that control panel. And as long as you're doing that, then you will have achieved your dharma. You would know what it is that is going to contribute to you the most amount of energy here in this reality. And then through that process of the receiving of that energy, like when you do something amazing and someone says, hey man, thanks, this changed my life, that's the receiving the energy. So when you receive those confirmations, what then happens is this keeps boosting you. Imagine if, let's say, for instance, if I was delivering this message for I've been 7 years now, but imagine if, let's say by year 1, it's like one person listening. And this is what I also call the co-creation, is because if there was only one person listening, then you can easily agree that probably that person wouldn't be talking too much more longer. They would go on and do something else. And to me, those are direct signs of that you may not be in the place that you're actually supposed to be, in the place that you really fit with yourself. And to believe it or not, I even actually got to that point with delivering the message like I'm delivering it now. I realized that even talking to people using the language, since I knew so much about it, wasn't even the greatest expression of who I was. But instead, that if I began inventing, because right now we're creating a device that programs water, but if I went into inventing, it would be a better throughput for me to express to humanity truly what I feel for it, versus me just saying the words that are the sequences of me saying great things versus something that is multifaceted, multidimensional, the way that I am. So a part of discovering this uniqueness is actually to see what is the multidimensional aspects of yourself. And if what you're doing right now is really bringing out those multidimensional aspects, is it just utilizing one part of who you are, or is it utilizing different parts of who you are? So that way you can feel the massage of all aspects of self in order to get into really good shape. And so that's the beginning. I know it's kind of a long answer to a very short question about the paradigm shift, but that's, again, exactly how I see it, that a person can go through this paradigm shift anytime they wish. We're not waiting at all on the physical reality to go through it. Many different people are experiencing it right now. And what we can do, though, is when we discover our uniqueness, and we will, and many are already doing that, what you have to contribute then into the external reality, because this is where you would push your energy into still until you leave here, then your contributions will actually make the change that many times we want to see with our minds, meaning that we set these intentions and we say, oh man, the world's really going to change. And we start to focus on that, and a lot of people focusing on that. And actually that was going on 40 or 50 or 60 years ago in Mount Shasta. And if anyone was monitoring, they would probably say, well, I don't actually see that things got better. I saw that they got worse. But again, you cannot determine that unless you're looking at the individuals that are going through their paradigm shift, go into their universe or university, have discovered this multiplicit side of themselves, that they are indeed not just a planet, but an entire universe, and then begin to question what state is their universe in. Are they still ruling as this good king or good queen or good goddess or good god, or have they completely forsaken their temple and now they're just off and wandering after something else? And so, you know, this brings us to a very serious part of our entire existence. It actually is the part that creates the adepthood within us. And I would just say that the encouragement that we should all have is that we are not the first ones. We are not the last ones. There, in fact, is no such thing. That we cannot cease to exist because we never were born in the first place. A part of this programming that's being delivered in the reality is this whole idea of birth, because when one thinks that they were born, then they must think that they're going to die. That's just the whole thing. There's a yin and yang. So just as you believe something great, there's another component of that actually is what you would perceive as not so great. And so we must be prepared at all times to see the entire picture, as they say, 360 degrees, not 180, not half. You know, and I say the symbolism within this is actually that we only see one side of the moon, and then the other side is supposedly not visible from where we are. And this is very similar to how we often view life, is that we only really see one side of our lives. And now we're being invited to see the other side, so that way we can move beyond what's called life, what's called time. And this is not a theory, and this is not a hypothesis. This is facts. Because what happens is that as you rapidly begin to move through your consciousness and you speed things up a bit in order to see the continuum, you'll start realizing that actually we know everything already. Everything that is truly important, we know already. And what the physical reality offers is what was determined as foolishness to gods or the supreme. And this is the highest aspect of yourselves, because then you would get on this process of thinking that you needed to go and learn something or study something or achieve something in order to actually unlock what's already within. And I found that most people who truly went through awakening actually did that many times just by themselves, and having the opportunity to pull themselves out of the reality for a while and all the things distracting around them, even schools and curriculums and religions, etc. And then just getting into that space to where you truly can not know self from the mind, which is basically a maze, but knowing self from who you truly are. So then you find words like belief, maybe, and all those kind of words virtually removed from the person's conversation, and what they start really emitting is this knowing. And then what that knowing does, and this is very interesting, is anytime you get into any kind of session and you're the one that is in that all-knowing space, then knowing always trumps belief. Like if you get someone that says, well, I believe, and I believe this, and I believe that, versus another person that says, well, I know, you'll find that people will be more comfortable with the person saying that they know versus the person that they believes. Now here that says they believe. Now this is what also becomes tricky in the reality now, because we have many people, let's say a person owns a casino and I don't know, a strip club, who knows? Like, and in our aspect of judging, then that's not going to push the reality forward. But the person that's doing that is not actually in a belief of what they're doing. They're actually in a knowing of what they're doing. They're fully convinced that what they're doing is the best thing that they can actually do. Versus if you find a quote unquote conscious person that is thinking of, let's say, starting a holistic or a wellness institute, you'll find will be a lot into the belief area of, I wonder if it's going to make it, and I wonder if this is going to thrive. And of course, this is why the reality can often support people who see what other people are doing and then also attempt to do the same thing, following the same ropes, and then maybe they reach success. Versus with your uniqueness, it's such a unique calibration that, true enough, all of us can give you advice, and everyone can give you some aspects of what they've achieved, etc. But to actually unearth it, to truly unlock it, you must do it yourself. And this is actually the secrets to really what the chakras are, is that the chakras, with their unique shapes, are basically keyholes. And you have to find that key maker within yourself to be able to turn that locked chakra, because many of the chakras have been actually seen to be fused in a certain sense, that they need to be kind of moved and unlocked, or they're kind of moving out of bounds or slow or sluggish. And this all has to do with the awareness of self. And so, yeah, you know, I can really go a lot of places with what's been learned. So the most important thing for me has always been to just bring out what needs to be known in this time and this space. So, you know, if there is some more questions on this, we can drill into this a bit more.
Boy, that's a lot of information. That is just echoing a lot of what we've already heard about.
And I do love what you say about finding your own passion. Because certainly when you do something that you love, there's a certain force, there's a certain energy, certain, I guess, happiness and bliss about things that allows you to flow through life.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's the linchpin to everything. See, what happened was is I started listening to a lot of people that were just, real about it and just saying, hey, I totally get it that I'm supposed to eat better. I need to change my environment. I need to do some reality sculpting. I even need to, determine what kind of sounds are being played all the time and kind of do some soundscaping and, all the different things that we taught in the university. But many also came with this aspect of saying, but still, because my job is taking up so much time, it's basically job is like a ritual. So it's easier to actually remember things about the job than other stuff because the job is a ritual. It's every single day, all the time. And there's so much hinging on it. So this starts to actually dominate the consciousness. And in many people's cases, their job is not actually congruent to what they want to see from themselves in this reality. So I started saying, since we had gone so high, I mean, we basically blew the roof open on the entire projection. Like the world is in itself a massive projection. And we decided, well, let's land the ship then. Everyone had that in the group that I was instructing, and also others that were following us had gone all the way through the ascension process as we know it, and then found out that ascension doesn't mean you just die and that you're no longer here on earth. It actually means that you're actually on earth in the ascended state. And what that means is that now you still have to find your way in the world, but that doesn't mean that you have to compromise your time and your energy, because the entire time and energy system and power system is a brokering system. It doesn't just exist within what we're calling the physical reality. It's actually thermodynamics, which exists in the universe. So this is not just, okay, something I'm experiencing here on earth because some Bilderbergers or some bankers put some banks together. There's always in the physical realities a system of exchange. And what you find, again, when you really research all these deeper teachings, is they encourage a person to find that unique gift, the talent, because what that talent is going to do is it's actually going to give you the energetic potential that's needed to ascend out of a vortex. Now, let's talk about the vortex a bit, because some people start to maybe blame the vortex on others. And I feel like the only person to blame always should be self, because then when you want to change something, you can always change it yourself, versus if you blame it on Trump or blame it on somebody else, then we have to wait for them to do their thing and then we can change self. So no, this is about how you can actually begin to change yourself and how you can begin to empower yourself to get to the levels that are unlimited. And a big part of this, again, is when discovering the uniqueness, you have to begin to cultivate it. And so it's not necessarily the session to begin to teach a person how to unearth their uniqueness. Many people already know in what aspects that they find their most creative side, but it also means that when we take that uniqueness and we start to utilize it, then it embodies everything that we do. So we start to transition from what the reality has given us as, well, this is your role that we want you to play in the reality. You are a computer engineer. And it transcends into, well, yeah, I was a computer engineer in the reality, but now I learn how to use that in order to develop my uniqueness. So it doesn't mean also that you've wasted any time, because some people have this aspect of looking at things like, well, if I'd have learned this, 50 years ago or 20 years ago, then it would have changed my life. Actually, no. The truth is that you're living life after life after life after life. It's a continuum. You only start to become aware of the parts that you feel like you made a mistake at. And let me explain that. When you leave the body, and now there's a complete detachment between the physical body and what we would know as the spirit body, what happens then is that, this is why many people say they see their lives flash in front of their eyes. And because all our experiences are just memories, and our memories are projections, and those projections are created with light. So we see all of these projections of what we've experienced. And of course, if you're used to beating up on yourself, if you're used to duality and saying, because you did this wrong, and that's why it's important to get out of duality, then you actually get into this space to where you say, you know what, I want to jump right back in right there before I got married, or before I went to college, or before right there when I made that decision, I want to jump in there. So if you notice, many times in your life that you're living now, you'll have these deja vu moments to where you'll be like, whoa, I mean, was I here before? And those deja vu moments are actually a sheer sign that there's a part of your consciousness that's saying, hey, right here was when we should have went left instead of right. What we're introducing here is how to get out of that entire cycle called reincarnation, right? Coming back into kar, which is actually the word for flesh or physicality, and then the nation. We understand what a nation means, a group or a collective. So to put the brakes on reincarnation, which is actually some of the highest levels of study in the Eastern traditions, is that you must get to a point of fulfillment. Now, fulfillment is not success. Success actually comes in spurts, and it's like, okay, I finished developing the website. Now here's another thing to do. Fulfillment is when you can do anything and know that if time was removed from you right then, you had already got the t-shirt. You are already ready to transcend into this next stage. There's no regrets. There's nothing to go back to. And most importantly, there's no fear, because see, what happens is that ideas of time, ideas of scarcity, and ideas of death all create this fear. And fear is a program utilized within the reality that is in conjunction with pain, because pain is what we remember even more than joy. We actually remember pain more than joy because we prefer joy and we don't like pain. So we always remember the pain. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So what happens here in all this is the transcendence, or the paradigm shift, is reaching into those aspects of self through the meditations and things, and realizing that actually you live as a being that has no dependencies. Even water and air and those kind of what I call the real gods, the ones that are not going to ask you if you want to worship them, but the ones that, you know, are going to demand that there's some communion and communication going on all the time. In your higher levels of meditations, you begin to realize that those are things that are also things that you're choosing to enjoy. And so the reality then becomes more of your alchemical cabinet. It becomes to where you know now more about the energies and how they move, and that this is not just something that is like a fleeting life, but actually a very complex projection that you can do a lot of things in. And so this kind of puts the person more into the act, or as we say, the act in activation, versus this recipient level, which is what we call the downloader, a recipient level of just saying, okay, you know, as it comes into me, then I'm going to respond to it. So switching that and going into a complete manifestor, what we call an uploader, saying that, okay, I'm dealing with this alchemical cabinet here in the planet, and now I'm going to create this because I understand the dynamics of it. Now, those dynamics are real things. Like there's a certain arc, for instance, a degree, that when things are built using that degree, it creates this strange holophonic effect if you're talking in rooms like that are built that way. And it's like the way the cathedrals are built. So if there weren't any mechanics to this reality that we're in, stuff like that wouldn't occur. So I do find that if we spent our time in actually learning those mechanics to how things work, if we want to participate in the physical reality, then it's much more useful than going long stints with beliefs and going long stints with just absorbing knowledge and information that's about the past, especially, or maybe even the future. And the reason for this is because if you hear information about history and you didn't experience that history yourself, this means that, meaning that you don't remember a conscious life where you were actually there. This means that either way that you have to load it. You have to read it, and then it comes to into your mind in English, and then it now must interpret itself into pictures and scenes, so you get an idea of what's going on. And that's the entire process of programming, okay? So instead of programming yourself in a very one-dimensional and even a half-dimensional way about the past, you now get an opportunity to actually be present so that you can open up the hypersensory side of yourself. And this is what, you know, is often experienced when you start realizing that you don't even just have this consciousness that can perceive what's in front of it. You have a multi-sensory level of consciousness that can perceive not only what's around you, but also what crosses through different aspects of time. And these tools and these abilities actually push a person into a higher state of awareness. Now, this is another thing that I want to mention as a disclaimer in this conversation. It doesn't take a person to be extremely intelligent, once more, or mention this, to achieve all of this. Like, granddaddy and grandmama may achieve this. The little kid that's sitting there on the side of the sidewalk may have achieved this. Even if it's, what I'm saying is, if it's coming across as complex to you today, that's because maybe you're attempting to use your mind to actually solve it versus realizing that you already know all of this. And then what happens is that wholeness, we don't even call it peace, because peace means to divide two things, as in two pieces. But that wholeness begins to pervade over your consciousness, and then that's when you get into the zone. That's actually what the Zen state truly is. That's when you're going to see, when you're writing something, which they call copyright, like when you need to develop some kind of text or jargon for your campaign or your program that you have with your computer or whatever you're doing, where you have to convey to others what you truly are about and what you mean. That's when it starts coming into play. That's when it serves you the most. And so, you know, these kind of modes of thought and states of being, I would say, are very productive for the being, because they actually start the process of moving themselves out of this whole idea of time. I'm going to be late. It's got to happen now. Oh, we need to do it already, into the space that, because if you're doing that, let's say, for instance, a basketball player can't actually be thinking about, when they get into the zone, is that ball going to go in, and where the arc of my hand, and no, that's not what's going on. Actually, they're so in the know about that shot, it goes in. They can ring that shot 5 or 6 or 7 times, versus the person who's like all technical and tries to actually do it will miss it, let's say 3 out of 5 times, to make it 2 times out of 5 times, etc. So what we're talking about is basically tapping into the flow of self by removing the interruption, which comes from the mind. And this interruption, if people want to understand it a bit deeper, it's actually called thinking versus knowing. So in the thoughts, of course, thoughts are like an interruption. You could be hearing something and say, well, what about this? And, well, I believe that, but I believe it a little bit different. So all those thoughts, no matter what they are about, are actually interruptions. What we've learned to do is actually absorb and observe not only the reality that we're in, but also when others are saying things to us, in order to see the entire picture before engaging what would then be the R complex of the brain, engaging that part of the brain, which actually turns things backwards. Why? Because we live reality forward, but we perceive it backwards. So, and think about what I'm just saying. We live reality, like right now, just 10 minutes ago is now in the past. But for me to truly reflect on what's happened in life, I must think backwards. So this shows, again, the directions. And it sounds so simple, but it's also necessary to pay attention to, you know, when we're going to behind to try to reflect on things. And that kind of closes what I was attempting to present here, which was about the densities, the vortex. What the vortex is as a solar being. Now, the solar being is neither male nor female, contrary to the English trying to make the term we use for the sun as a male, like my son, right? So this is the trick on the language that I was explaining, but it exists in so many different ways. So the solar being, which is male and female and has a neutral, right? Positive, negative, neutral creates a dynamo. This solar being that you are only has really one direction. And the interesting thing is that when you're on that stage, it's not even a direction. So it's very difficult to explain to people what direction, if it's right or if it's left. It's a way of being. So in that way of being, you're actually experiencing everything in that moment. So this is pure energy. There's no differentiations. There's no dividing. Hey, I had a good time at the mall yesterday. There's no time segments. Any level of division is not there. That's what allows it to be pure energetic force. So that's the state that we exist in, and we're there now. When we reflect, however, when you say, man, I remember that time, in the moment that you reflect, it's like you're looking backwards. You're like looking into your stardust, the smog that comes out of the back of the sun while it's experiencing all these projections. And you literally say to yourself, I want to go back to that moment. I remember my grandmother. And when you do that, you put back on what we call members, the dense parts of the reality that allow us to go in like surgeons and use the tools necessary to read the lower level of the projection. So let me just explain that. When you're experiencing things right away, it comes in as a feeling. But when you reflect on them, now they have names. Now it has a street name. Now it has and it has all this physicality added to it. So many people are actually at the state in the paradigm shift to where they're ready to actually get rid of the idea of physical realities for themselves. Now, you won't be able to do that for everyone. Forget about it. But the truth is that when you're no longer perceptive of it, does it really even matter if someone else is perceptive of it or not? Meaning when you close your eyes, does my eyes close too? No. So in this reality, we have to realize there's a lot about it that's literally like that you have to make the choice to when you want to do it. You're the pilot of your own ship, the lord of your own life, the captain, etc. And so when you choose to say, okay, you know what? I'm done with living in my reflections. I'm done with living in my past. I'm done living in my memories and my regrets. And now I'm ready to just experience full on limitless. Now, full on limitless is a real thing. In fact, we found that it was kind of more difficult to handle the energy attached to limitless than anything else. And so it was so liberating, though, because it actually proved that everything that was taught in the reality was wrong. Because in the reality, we live on this limited potential. There's time, there's oil, there's all these different things. We get older, all these different things that say, hey, it runs out. Versus on the other side of this, you realize that actually there's so much of this that even trying to broker it with your limited potential and the idea of who you think you are of yourself, it becomes quite difficult. And many people have experienced that in their ascension process, that they're encouraged through the process to merge into the complete totality of who they are, which is everything. So this means that there is no separation between us and nature. There's no separation between us and these bugs, this metal, these people, none of that. And the one who knows that, not believes, and this is two different things, the one who knows that is able to even command those forces, and those forces obey, because those forces are still in the idea, let's say, that they are that. Meaning that even gold is still in the idea of believing it's gold. Even insects are still in the idea of believing they are insects. It's actually encoded within their pattern. So as an apex being, meaning a being that is endowed with their own volition, you can sail your own ship now. That's the gift that was given to you. You can choose to go and follow another current, which is what it would be, and sail off with some others, pirates or seafarers, or you can choose to actually become the navigator. And then this navigator, because time is still passing, things are still going on, this navigator then must go through the process of actually putting themselves back on track or back into synchronicity, okay? And what the synchronicity is basically lining the person up with themselves. That's why you experience these synchronicities the more and more you go into ascension. It's like you're saying a word and then something on TV is saying that same word, and you know, somebody just calls you, they say they thought about the same thing. So all those synchronicities are all connections to when you're catching up with yourself. And, you know, and it's a magnificent journey. It's very serious. And as the adepthood brings to us, it brings the growth and it brings the maturity that is necessary to have the ability, just like a parent is not going to give the child, let's say the car, right? And this is very similar to what it's like, because the cars are the vehicles that we're traveling in, whether that's the spirit body or whatever it is. So the parent is not going to give the car to a 3-year-old, 4-year-old. And not to mention the car is given when you start proving that you can even drive. And then after that, it's like there's even limits on, okay, well, you can't stay out all night. You got to come back, bring my car back. And this is like your parents talking to you. So none of what we experience in the reality is different than what's actually going on in the total macrocosm. So we have to see it at that. We have to realize that there's a galactic parent, which we call the oversoul. We have cars or vehicles. We're living in the house still. And if we're ready to actually get out of this and get on our own, as we say, then we need to learn how to sail the ship. And to sail the ship, you must learn how to blow wind in your own sails. And wind in your own sails, because just as the word sails, C-E-L-L-S-S-A-L-E, like there's all these words are all the same. It's just saying through your uniqueness, you will discover how to motivate yourself. That way you don't actually consider that someone else is supposed to be and responsible for motivating you. That's easily how to get let down. But we work on taking the crutches off though. See, I'm talking about something that is done in different aspects or different segments of training yourself. not all at once. This is not a genie in the bottle where it's like, okay, genie, I just want to go into ascension, boom. And then, or like my favorite one is, I don't want to die. And then, 5,000 years later, you're in this old decrepit body. You're like, genie, I can't stand this. You say, well, you need to be a little bit more specific. You said you didn't want to die, but maybe you should have said you wanted to stay like you were 20 and all the rest of this. And this is kind of how it is to take on this vehicle. It's not just you putting your foot on the gas, it's also knowing where to go and knowing how to steer it. And the good thing that the universe has done, because it is a university, is it's given us a class. And that's why this whole universe, as far as the languages and the programming is concerned, came from the stars. Now, English language actually is a deviation from the star pattern. It's actually someone attempting to chart out an entirely new course inside of the cosmic structure. So using the same structure, but putting the order in a different ways in order to change how a person perceives the reality, versus the ancient languages lined it up from in the cabal or the cable from the beginning to the end. So then you can determine where you are in that whole process. Then you would know where you're going. And then this would not necessarily ruin it for you. It would prepare you for what you're about to deal with. Just as sure as you can look at the sky and say, hey, this is about to rain, I better get my umbrella. And then also, if you can look at it and say, it's going to be a sunny day, let me go ahead and put on some shorts. So this is how the reality is actually read, or what I call actuality. Because reality to me is what we think is going on. Actuality is what's really going on. So I can give myself very positive reinforcements all day, and that does really well for me. And that would be my own personal reality. If I really want to start removing and releasing and changing and all that kind of stuff, that, the prime mover stuff, then I need to get into the knowing. And then the knowing comes when I activate those aspects of myself. And so, yeah, so that's what I have to deliver about just the paradigm shift. Hopefully we've covered enough for a person to get a good idea of at least what I feel and know to be really good things to begin to make the progress into that direction more.
Absolutely. You touched on so many particular points that just resonated with me on a deep level. And some of them, at least one of them, was when you started in the beginning, you were talking about something that one of my past life guides calls the separate but equal theory of consciousness, meaning we are unique individuals, unique personalities, and at the same time, we are also part of the oneness of consciousness of the universe. We are all connected. And it's not one or the other. It's not dualistic. But yet it appears dualistic. And that was one point, and I'm just going to go through the particular things the three things that I really caught on to. And the second thing was this idea of an obsolete, we're very much holding on to the Big Bang theory of the creation of the universe. And you started talking about the infinite universe, or the steady state universe theory, which had no beginning and no end, but was always here. Time. The universe was always here. And the third thing was you were talking about knowing, which was sort of where there's this idea of, because we both sort of study mysticism, our own version of mysticism. I think we have a similar background. And there's the path of illumination, and there's this idea that you need to study and pursue knowledge, pursue higher knowledge or esoteric knowledge or information as if there's something to achieve, when in fact, once you tap into the all-knowing, and I guess you could call it the higher self or the oversoul or whatever terms you give it, that inner guru, you are the all-knowing, and you're always in the all-knowing. So you're not believing anymore, but you're in that infinite source of wisdom, so that you always have those answers within you. So all those were three things that you pointed out during your presentation that really stuck with me. I don't know if you want to say any more than that.
Well, for sure,
on any of those topics.
Now you've learned, and you've learned, now you must unlearn it. And this is really how it really works. I mean, that's why I say everything comes in a specific order, though. You just can't start off with the unlearning, even though some people that have got to the all-knowing be like, yeah, it's better if we just started off with the all-knowing. Well, we did. and this is also the wrestling that goes on, and it's literally like wrestling with God in the physical reality, because in the physical reality, there must be an explanation for everything. So there is actually no explanation of where nothing comes from. And actually, that was the end of the knowledge. I got to a certain point where I realized that we came from nothing, and I realized how that created a paradox for how we normally process information, because it's like talking to a child. The child keeps saying, why? And then if the child just says, you know, well, we come from nothing, and then you tell the child, well, we come from nothing, they say, why? It's going to be the end. And even if you go to any spiritual book and try to figure out where nothing comes from, it can't. You know, if it does, then run from it, because it's definitely cooked up a really massive lie. The truth is again, that all of these constructs and confines we've put together as a way of defining literally what this experience is about, because we come from a space that doesn't have a definition. And that can be very uncomfortable for certain beings, especially if they've come into this already. And this is why, like, when a person gets into, let's say, a high vibratory frequency, it can become uncomfortable for them in there. They can start feeling like, okay, well, am I going to die? You know, I don't know if I should have did this. You know, there becomes a lot of fear, because what they've done, especially if you take certain elements that do that, is that you still have your physical body, but now you're actually experiencing more of your spiritual body at that point. So there's a tear or rip, and this rip is literally ripping you between time and no time. So it could be completely disorientating until you figure out what is going on. And that generally comes through taking those journeys and actually getting familiar more with the spirit body and how it operates, and how to get beyond that point to where you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm so afraid that, you know, I don't want to let go. And because what happens is like, I used to have this fear of deep water, until I realized that it was easier to swim in deep water than it was in shallow. And that's just the truth. And so, because what happened was I used to always try to base what swimming was going to be like by jumping into like 3 feet or 4 feet. You know, I'm 6 feet tall. So it's like, okay, well, I still can stand up. But then when I would get into areas where, of like, let's say the ocean, where I couldn't stand up, then I would get this whole anxiety, and I would try to get just back into the area where I could stand up. And then one day I actually was out, you know, when you're snorkeling or whatever, you have a life vest on. And so I was out with some friends, and, you know, we were out there snorkeling, having a great time. And then I realized that I forgot my life vest, that it was actually at the beach. And then it was at that moment that I realized that, hey, you know, it's much easier to swim in deep water than you think. And this could be very similar to, as an analogy to what I'm talking about when it comes beyond getting through that threshold of fear, because that fear is actually really a body ID. If, you know, we all can admit that living in Wonderland. Now remember, the code is Alice is in Wonderland through the looking glass. So this means that looking into the mirror gives us this idea that what we're actually looking at in the mirror is us. And then it just begins from there. And that's why mirrors are some of the strongest components used in magic, right? And so once we get into this whole path of looking at, believing that we're that person in the mirror, we're actually witnessing, at least on a subconscious level, this gradual decay of us, quote unquote, getting older. And this interlocking of this relationship is actually causing a person to send information to themselves, to program themselves that they believe is coming from somewhere else, meaning to believe that all these external components actually have that much control and power over you is only the belief in itself in an egregor. And these egregors could be religions. These egregors could be the sun. It could be the moon. It could be any kind of thing that you think is a maxim in your life that can't be nullified and moved out of the way. Now, what the adept knows is everything in the reality. And this is why you always see the magus or the magician there controlling the storm and all these different animals. And it's because there's a knowing, not a belief, but there's a knowing that all things that are in physicality are subservient. And that's just what it is. If it can be named, it can be controlled. That's what the ancient texts say. It's subservient to all the things that are bound within that confine. And when you remove yourself from that, because I'm not just talking about other things external to us, I'm talking about us. We've given ourselves a name, or we let someone else give it to us. We go by that name. That name means something, but it doesn't define who we completely are. Actually, name is an anagram for Amen. It means hidden. So that means who you truly are is hidden behind that name. So there's all of these things that we can use to encourage ourselves that give us affirmations of what we know to be true already. And this is what we call the blueprint. It's literally having something that is able to interpret the as above, so below nature and what we're experiencing, so we can come to these realizations that, yeah, you know what, as long as I'm still within this certain state of mind and I don't get beyond the mind, then I'm always going to be wrapped in the confines of time. So how do I get beyond the mind? Is there something else that ever said anything about this or ever talked about this? And then what we start realizing is actually, yeah, there was quite a bit of text that talked about, well, I guess the recent story running is about the Anunnaki and sending humans on into the mines to find gold, right? And all these are just paradoxes, metaphors of basically saying that the external thinking can send you into your own mind to try to expunge what is the most valuable to you so that you can bring it out into the physical reality. But then when we do that, because we can do that with our children, we can do that with our businesses and ideas. When we do that, if we then give it to someone else or something else, and this was the whole play with, you know, they work and bring us the gold. If you give your ideas, you give your creativity, you give your energy, you give your limitless to something else, it doesn't actually mind taking it from you. And there is nothing in the universal blueprint actually that says there's anything wrong with that. This is what even gets even more deeper. We feel like there's so many injustices going on, but in actuality, when you agree to something, when you bind yourself to something and that's through these beliefs, etc., then nothing is actually happening out of the ordinary. And this is why we know that we can take power back over our lives once we push that power back into ourselves and say, you know what? It's no longer Jesus. It's no longer whatever that has the power, Guru, Shram, or whoever that has the power over determining what I know and what I don't know. It's actually me. And if I only just took the life that I lived, not the past and not the future, but just the life that I've lived up until this moment, I have enough there to actually increase my own personal faith and my own personal belief in self, who I am, and the reality that I'm truly in to get to the next stage. So I don't actually need 2,000-3,000 years worth of knowledge, even 5,000 parsecs worth of knowledge. You know, it's just going to be a bunch of stuff to dig through in order to get that main maxim, which is all is self, first of all. So every single thing that you're seeing here is really another variation of you. Now, it's exploded, though. That's what the Big Bang concept is really about, is basically the beginning of deuce, which is to split something into two, then four, what we call mitosis. And then you would get into these infinite amounts of possibilities as it's perceived by us, because it's moving on a fractal equation, which we would call phi. So it would keep producing all these different variations that would be perceived as being different, but all would come from the same source truly. And for one moment, if we just look at the source code, like where everything is actually coming from and emitting from, which are geometric shapes, then we would realize, okay, so this is how the vessels are created. This is how the bodies are created. This is how all the patterns that we see in the physical reality, whether we're using the third eye or not using the third eye, this is where those patterns are coming from. So this pattern is literally a code then. And this is what, when you rip back the veil of the reality, you start seeing just everything as a geometric code or a light language. And then when we get more into breaking down that language, let's say, and beginning to realize how that language exists even with us, then we begin to speak that language. And that's the language of that manifestation. That's the language of what we would say is a time lord, a person who can move through different aspects of time and manifest things. And it's just because they're only sending out exactly what they want. They're not sending out mixed signals. They're not sending out signals that are not constant, which is basically belief versus knowing. It's just they're dialing it right in, and then they're receiving the response that they're looking for. Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is. I mean, you just give us some incredible information, and it's very technical, but it's very, I mean, it's very pertinent. It's very useful and practical in terms of trying to gain back, like, I mean, you're just basically talking about empowerment and empowering yourself to become the divine.
because we've been disempowered. Like I wouldn't ignore anything going on and just assume that it doesn't happen and doesn't exist. Like I would want to work through any kind of issues and any kind of problems. And if let's say in the fake matrix, I just love to call it that way, they've enacted an entire scheme of disempowering others so that they won't know their true power, then there must be then a deprogramming process to actually re-empower that person. And a big aspect of that would be to know, why would someone do that to them? I think that a big part of good people, if you may, is just not accepting that there's also bad people that don't think the same way that they do. It's like, okay, well, why would someone even want to do that? And then when you look at even the political structures, ever since there was a king and a queen, actually, that wasn't a direct member of the tribe, it's been going on since then, where one being or a group of them will attempt to elevate themselves over others and insist that they've achieved something that others have not. And this is a direct lie, that actually all of us have the same allotment. However, if you get supplanted, and this is why, you know, spiritual texts actually show, especially from some of these more nefarious characters, what really happened. And this goes on in the supplanting of a person's allotment. And, you know, I'll bring it to a close here, but the truth is, again, that we have the universe, and it belongs to us. You have your own personal universe. So nothing then would be more valuable than the entire universe in a physical reality. And since you have that, actually, now the universe needs to be refined. And this is why you have alchemy, because it shows you how all the elements in the universe can actually be refined to the top element. It's called a synthesis. So our process sometimes in living in life with other alchemists or architects is that they're attempting to synthesize us and get the most valuable thing out of us so that they can extract it and use it, versus us synthesizing ourselves, figuring out what is the height and the truth of self, and then using that to restore ourselves and cause a panacea, or basically something that cures all diseases. Like the diseases are not just physical now, we actually have some spiritual diseases. We have some coding viruses going on within our consciousness that have been embedded there. However, why? Well, anytime you say, I've learned something, now must come the test. That's all the university is about, is that when you say, you know what, I've mastered the course of non-duality. The only thing universe is, well, let's see. Let's throw some stuff out there for him to hate or her to hate and see how they respond. Look, they're still doing it. No, actually, it's going to take a little bit more than just you saying it to actually do it. And how do you do it? You start focusing on yourself, your uniqueness and gift. Don't try to nullify duality from your brain. The brain actually has a right and a left hemisphere. So this is going to be extremely confusing to try to think your way out of non-duality. Mm-hmm. What it's about is removing the idle time that we have that is serving the cause of others and other things, and then bringing that time central back to self to begin the healing process. And so, yeah, I know my time is running a bit short here, so, you know, I'll tie it up. And as far as just what I have to say for today, it's just to let everyone know that just as I've learned, I must unlearn. I know a lot of different things about different respects of how this entire mainframe is put together. And the most important thing that I've gained, however, in all of this, and this is why I always talk about this over and over again, is that all-knowing and how to stay in that space when you're doing your creating. So, you know, I'll just leave it at that. And if there's obviously any more questions or any more additions to this, then I'd be more than happy to shed some light on.
Thank you so much, Sevan. I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah, that absolutely was. You are spectacular when it comes to, I mean, explaining metaphysical philosophy and mystical principles, and just delivering it in a very I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm just always
in a knowing sort of way. The way you talk about it, it's almost like you're not going to our brain, you're going deeper. So it's thank you for explaining it.
Well, the only thing that we can do better than that is showing. And so, yes. Yeah, I mean, we started open source spirituality, which is basically all of us creating this, let's say, flowchart or map that is organic, like an organic grid that we can all begin to utilize to understand where we're at. And so that's why, and then also different people have different kind of experiences, but when we put all those experiences together, we actually create an entire field that allows us to see, hey, that's where those experiences go on. And this is how, you know, this is why this certain thing happened to this person. And then again, the transcendence level is that, okay,
amazing.
now we get it. Let's move on. Let's create some action here. Let's do some things. Let's do some humanitarian efforts. Let's really work with Earth. Let's bring back our creative side. Let's start getting our inventions together. Like, this is the day of the desktop. That's why I was in this room today. This is one of my creative spaces. And I have things here to where if I have an idea, I can start to work on creating that idea. And this is really one of the first times in history that something like that has been available for developing physical items, I would say. But we've always had the ability to do it within.
And this is what people love about you, and this is what we love about you, is you deliver such an inspiring information that people can use to break out of their outer matrix and their inner matrix.
It's really about
of their mind, and that's wonderful.
It's really about being the most that you can be, about really expanding,
being everything you are.
Amazing.
That you,
amazing.
That
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sevan.
You're welcome. We have so much. It's been given to us, and let's utilize it.
Thank you so much for being part of this conference, Sevan. Thank you. Bye for now.